Welcome everyone. It is IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and the only news program in the world bringing you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. My name is Andy. I am operations manager here at IKYA Center in Oslo, and we're very pleased to have you with us tonight. Before we get started, right away down below, subscribe to IKYA here on YouTube. Like and share this live sending right away to fellow spiritual seekers. Go out, share it on social media, share it on email, but share it. Your friends, family, and other spiritual seekers can join us throughout the sending tonight. So the more people we can bring in, the more impact that we can have on the discussion of the world's news. So then go and like and follow IKYA.official on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And then we're going to get started in our discussion tonight. IKYA Live is a discussion of world news, so we need your questions and perspective for tonight's topic in order to make it a real exchange and to really lift our consciousness around tonight's important news topic, which is sex, sexuality, intimacy, and intimate relationships. What does the future hold? The established religion, all human religions for as long as time has existed for humanity, they have sort of deemed sexuality as taboo. It's really been one of the core tenets of established religion. But now, in addition, we have technology, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and social media are also attacking our relationship to sex and sexuality and our intimate relationships. So this is really a burning question and a question for the entire species. What is the future of sex and sexuality? It's at the core of our survival, but how do we relate to it, and what will the future bring? So let's go ahead and get started with our conversation. And IKYA, what's the current status of our relationship to sex and sexuality?
It's, in general, it's decreasing. In our part of the world, in the industrial parts of the world, people are having less sex, and less and less. And, they wait for longer for their first time. And people are simply less interested in sex, like real sex with people. And when we look to Japan, you have people in their 30s, and a lot of them have never had sex. And they don't care too much about it either, right? And we're seeing the same tendencies in our part of the world. And sex is becoming more complicated, and there are more rules. And just, what many people experience is that if someone talks to me and I don't like it, it's harassment, right? If I like them, it can be flirtatious, and that's okay. It's becoming very difficult. But we are now at the stage where our genetics simply don't know how to behave because our civilization has changed so much. And with technology, we live in our brains more than ever. We've always lived in our brains, but we also have to relate to the real world. Now, through technology, we can basically just extend what's going on in our brain and then manipulate our world around us to just mirror that. And that is also changing us in ways that we've never seen before. The whole thing with technology, it's a huge experiment. Right? Social media and the impact. We've never been here before, right? And it's doing things to us that are not necessarily healthy. So, when we spend this much time on, our gadgets, our brains will see it as a shortcut. Now, throughout evolution, how we have been navigating is through brain chemicals, right? Reward chemicals, or chemicals that are telling us to stay away from that. This is dangerous, you should do this. And that basically comes from our life form developing very slowly over time. So if you think of like all the experience that the life form collectively has gathered, that becomes kind of the default setting in your DNA, then instructing you how to behave in different situations. And then you're manipulated through chemicals. So you're supposed to become addicted to your own chemicals, right? This is, when it comes to drugs, all of that, it's, the addiction is not to the drug, it's how it manipulates your production of chemicals. Because we have a natural addiction for that. We're supposed to, because when the collective knowledge throughout human evolution kind of tells us to behave a certain way in this certain situation, that is supposed to override whatever you think might be best, right? It's smart. But what do we figure out then is that we can start manipulating that, because we will always look for the best strategy and find the best shortcut to get the chemicals. When we look at what we do in life from a biological standpoint, it's just an elaborate way to get the chemicals. When you do something, it makes you happy. That happiness is produced in your brain, is all those wonderful chemicals. So you're then forced to do certain things that hopefully will be productive so you can get those chemicals, because that is the payoff. And we've always wanted to figure out how to manipulate that and go kind of straight to the chemicals. This is, of course, what we discovered when we found different drugs, like different plants, right? Humans have been high since forever. It's been an important part of the development of the brain. One of the reasons why humans developed a broader type of intelligence is because they got high so much. Humans found psychedelics from very early on, and they began to use them. And it's part of how humans developed their brain and became what they are today. So we've always been trying to figure out how to push our own buttons. Now, when you understand that everything we do is your DNA trying to manipulate the current version of itself, because if you think of the DNA as a life form, and then you just have the current version, which is your body, the DNA is trying to pull the strings, make you do stuff based on experience and how evolution works. And those chemicals will make you do anything. So when that's what you want, you will try to find how to get to the chemicals more efficiently. So we've done that. We've always been doing that. With everything on our gadgets, social media, whatever, it's designed to trigger the dopamine and other chemicals to make you feel good and to hook you. I've talked about the consumer world that we live in, where everything is designed to push your dopamine addiction. And it gets to a point where we understand, oh, I can go shopping, I can feel wonderful about myself. I can take drugs, I feel wonderful. I can watch TikToks all day and I will feel like I'm being very productive, because the thing is, when you get the reward chemicals, it's supposed to tell you that you've done good. Now you're a winner. You've done something really good and really important for everyone. And you can get those chemicals without actually doing anything. You can just watch TikToks and you can feel like you've had a very productive day. So, when we now live in a civilization where everything is built with intention to manipulate your brain chemistry and get you more and more hooked on your dopamine and other brain chemicals, you pretty much understand how to manipulate yourself. I think also people are taking more drugs than ever. right? We're having so many different strategies for self-medication, and self-medication is also self-manipulation to make you feel better, to release the reward chemical so you can feel, I'm a good person after all, right? So if you go out and you do some shopping or online shopping, their brain will tell you, you're a good person after all because you deserve this, right? So we do this all the time. So sex used to be important. And it, like, so in the brain's hierarchy, the kind of the sexual chemistry in your brain used to have the highest priority of everything, because that's the big prize, right? If you think from an evolutionary point of view, you're supposed to climb the hierarchy and the ladder and prove yourself and do all of that so that you can have sex, because only the best ones, only the winners, usually have the right to procreate. For men, that's always been the point of any competition, is sex. Right? This is also part of sports, and all of that is sex. There is something very sexual about sports. It's because it's the display of the best specimens. And when they're winning, those are the ones that are supposed to have sex with all the women. As animals, this is how it works. And you can see that in any type of pack animal, right? The males will fight, they will compete, and the best ones, the winners, will get all the females. Now, and the reason for this also is that, it took this planet 2 billion years to invent sex. Now, before that, you had, simple life forms going through cell division, right? That's how there would be more of them. But when you think of it, from an evolutionary standpoint, you will have a very slow evolution because you're basically just copying yourself. So you have to mutate within yourself, and then you copy yourself, and it will be exactly the same. So at some point, there were mutations, like into genders, where the DNA would be slightly different. And when you combine them, all of a sudden, you can have different males, different individuals with different DNA, and different females with different DNA, and you can then get all sorts of variations a lot quicker than through cell division, because then it's still an individual splitting itself, right? So that's why also the life forms that developed into 2 genders, they would accelerate, and they would grow, and they would change. So what we normally think of as evolution, and fast evolution, requires 2 genders. Because again, you spread your DNA, you get so many different variants, and that ensures survival and development. So, this is why this has been the highest priority. In our brain, therefore, the chemicals is associated with being successful, being on top. And this is also why when you actually have sex, you can feel like a winner after. Because you're supposed to. Only winners have sex. So if I have sex, I'm a winner. You can feel really good about yourself because you get those reward chemicals. But throughout evolution, that was supposed to be first priority. And then we found cocaine, right? And we found shopping. And we found like all of these different strategies that could then compete with the chemicals we get when we have sex. Because remember, it's always about getting to the chemicals. So what we've done with technology is to just be in our own brain. And if we can just imagine stuff and, do things while not doing them. For instance, play a video game, right? It can be extremely addictive because you get the same reward chemicals, because the brain does not understand the difference between a game and real life. You can say intellectually you understand the difference, but your brain does not understand it. This is why it works, because you get the same chemical profile, which means you can pretend to live while not living. And that is highly addictive because your brain is registering, oh, right, I can just sit here and do nothing, and then I get the reward chemicals. Everyone smart enough to think will think, oh, that's smart, when the point is the chemicals, not doing anything. Right? So our DNA is not concerned with doing, because we've always been doing things, and then we got the chemicals. So we're not hardwired to understand what's happening right now with technology. But we can then manipulate and stimulate and do all of this without actually doing anything. And we can get more chemicals and higher levels of them without doing anything. And then we have many different behaviors that can then trigger your production of brain chemicals in such a way that you experience them as competing with sex, or they can even be higher than sex, meaning that in your brain's priority, sex will be lowered. It will not be as interesting anymore, because the point is as much chemical as possible. So you lose interest in sex. And see, for instance, in Japan, where everybody is extremely, techno-oriented, that's why it's happening. They get their stimulation from something else, and interacting with people you're attracted to is not interesting because it's not safe. It's safer and more convenient to just talk with someone online or have a doll or whatever, right? And people are starting to have relationships now with AI-generated people. We are getting there. So this is just like one explanation of why it's happening, that we're simply losing interest in sex because the brain is saying there are so many other things that will give me more chemicals, right? And also the inconvenience of other people. Because what is also happening, which is a little scary, right, is when we project from our own brain and we demand to live in a world that only mirrors what we want it to. I've talked about this when it comes to how big corporations are trying to cater to your every need, making you feel, yes, I deserve it. I should never, ever have to hear something I disagree with, right? No one should ever challenge me. I'm always right because I deserve it. It's that, which means we're less tolerant towards other people than ever, right? We're more easily triggered because we believe I'm always right. My feelings are so important. I should never be challenged. Because that's the world we live in. When we go online, we only move towards what we like. Look at that kind of TikTok thing, is that we have complete control. Scroll, 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 and you watch, not entertain, next one. And it means you have this idea that I control the world. I do not have to look at anything I don't like. I don't have to engage with anything I don't like. And this is starting to affect us. This is changing our brains, changing our psychology, changing how we feel about things. And it's only moving in one direction. There's a lot to unpack here, but I think we have some questions.
Yep, we have a question from Sara in the audience.
Yeah. What I get connected to is, in a way, a more like a greater importance around spirituality and also working with connection and the heart. Because as I also experience this world, it's like we get more and more disconnected. And then we need more and more chemicals to feel like we have a meaning to life, and yeah, it gets like that substitute. So I'm not sure if you want to talk more about that.
Oh, there is so much to talk about around this. Okay, one thing is that over time, what will happen? And it's interesting when you look at it like in longer lines, right? I always try to look at the longer lines and often look at like millions of years of evolution because it's more interesting that way. Now, humans are at the starting point of taking control of their own evolution as a life form, right? Which means in the old days, only the winners would have kids. And of those kids, only the winners would survive, right? So we got the best DNA. When we get to a point where we start to form civilizations, more people survive because we start to develop empathy and social intelligence. Not just survival intelligence, but how are we supposed to create a dynamic between us? How can we take care of more people? Which means that people who would not normally have kids will have kids. People who would not normally survive will survive and have kids. And that also means that we get a lot of variety, but we get weaker. And at some point in a life form, this has happened so many times in different types of civilization and life forms beyond this planet. Then you get to a point where the civilization life form can start controlling their own evolution, which means that you've gotten to a point also where you genetically are getting weaker and weaker. So you shift tactics. And this will also happen on this planet, that instead of having reproductive sex, sex will become something else, and you will not produce babies that way. Now the culture and the civilization can look at, oh, what type of people do we actually need for our civilization to function? And if you think of that, and you will go back in time where humans lived in small groups, you will look at what type of people do we need, right? We need a hunter, we need this, we need that. You needed different assignments. And often the dynamic within the group would force that to happen, also through epigenetic, but also through who would get food. If you saw someone in the group of kids in your tiny, tiny little village, oh, right, he's got a talent, right? He'll be a warrior. He would have higher priority than the other kids. So it's not like everybody would survive. So when we then go to the big family, a whole civilization, we're now starting to move into a phase where we will do the same thing. What type of people do we need? Because we don't need everyone to survive. We don't need every type of person. Maybe we need specific skills. And when we look at how humans are behaving today, right, we may be better off with some modifications. It's just interesting how this kind of works. So this century, next century, one will begin to produce humans based on the characteristics that one sees will be necessary for survival, how to create a better dynamic and all of that. So that's just, what will happen. It's a natural evolution of a life form. At some point they take over and they begin to shape themselves. And this is also simply accelerated evolution. So we'll get there. And that means that sex will be something completely different because it's now not connected to reproduction, which means that we can rediscover sex and explore sex as also something else, not connected to biological survival, but only as communication, as connection, meaning that the potential is that sex will become more spiritual. It will be about connection. And because it's not about having children, it's about that connectedness and sharing of energy, and you can do that with many people in many different ways. So the whole field of human sexuality will turn into something else. But we can say that reproductive sex will disappear. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? From managing a civilization. It's just we go through different stages, and it's all natural. For a life form to take control of their own evolution is also natural because it happens with everyone. Sometimes that ends in disaster, but that's part of nature. That's also part of how evolution works. So also on this planet, this will happen. But it will open up sexuality and the potentials, but then we have to rediscover it as something else than it is today. And I think for many young people, they're actually moving in that direction, where it's more about sharing their energy, and they can be in many different forms of connectedness and intimacy and this or that. And where just connectedness and being together, and when the kind of sexual start begins, it's very blurry. And often it does not even have to be kind of conventional sex. So how we channel our energies and how we explore connectedness and togetherness, that will open up and become something else than it is today.
Online, Paul asks whether we'll be able to start manipulating the brain in the sort of the opposite way that we have been by, for example, creating the brain to be able to have a spiritual orgasm or go more deeply into spirituality.
If we're talking about the biological manipulation that will happen over time, it depends what humans want. In what direction do humans want this life form to move, right? Because over time, in just a very few generations, humans will be able to turn themselves into kind of whatever they want to. They can kind of like make different variations of humans based on what's needed. But we can do that type of work now through like tantric work, for instance. Learning to open up the sexual flow and understand it from a very different perspective. Right? And I think this is also part of the potential. When many people today feel like they're living inside themselves, right? They live in this projected world tailored to them, and they are not really connected because they only connect to online stuff and synthetic existence. They don't have real interactions anymore. It's then going past that level. At some point, we will be tired of that. We will kind of re-engage. It's just like, when we started the Industrial Revolution, it's not that long ago. And the best thing in the world was everything being manufactured. That was the future, right? And right after the Second World War, the best thing was to buy like TV dinners, like pre-made food. And all the projections, when you looked into the future, was that everyone will just eat manufactured food. No one would have kitchens anymore. And you actually had apartment buildings being built, even in this country, where they really didn't have kitchens, right? It was a thing in the States too, because you would have this kind of factory thing in the basement, or it would just be ordered from outside. So why would you need a kitchen? You would only eat manufactured food, right? And eating canned food, made by a machine, because that was hot. So that could actually be more expensive than if you made it yourself, right? Because that was the future. And of course, the future turned out to be very different, right? Once we got over the excitement of look what machines can do, and that actually lasted until the 90s. It took a while. When you look at food culture now, what we can truly say is the food culture is not about manufactured food. It's about artisan food. It's about, you learning to cook and experiment and this and that and diets and having fun and new ingredients and cooking shows and cooking books and all of that, right? Food culture has exploded and everything is man-made, and it's about you expressing yourself through food. If you told that to people like, after the Second World War, it would be incomprehensible. They wouldn't understand, how can you express yourself through cooking? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's about bringing food, on the table for your family. That's it. It was no fun, because when you had to, and you didn't have the energy or the resources, just something you have to do. Technology means that we get more time on our hands, which means we can learn about ourselves and we can learn to express. So we will go through the same thing when it comes to how we deal with sexuality and connectedness and how to exist. Now we're just, virtual reality, online this, I can cancel this and get it wonderful. But it will turn into canned food at some point, because it is. And some people like that. People buy frozen pizza. It's part of people's diet, right? People eat canned food. They eat takeaway. Wonderful. But it's not all we do. So the whole AI thing and what we do, it will be more balanced over time, because we will realize that, this is boring. When you exist in the world that only agrees with you, that's hell, right? Over time, in the beginning, I don't have to deal with all these idiots, and everybody's idiots, and I fucking hate them. But at some point, that gets boring, right? So hell is not to have people disagree with you, it's people always agreeing with you. That's a lot worse, right? And I always tell people you should never find a partner who will confirm you. You should find a partner who will challenge you, because that's where the growth is. That's where the excitement is. We need to be pushed in order to be better, right? To unfold and become everything we can be. It's never about confirming our current state, confirming what we already know, because then we just get more of the same. Their journey is always going beyond that, and you need a partner who can push and pull and trigger and challenge. And those who are smart enough to find partners who challenge them, they grow into love, right? And this is what you don't get online, because you're in control. When someone challenges you, you're not in control. So the best relationships are those that make you go fucking crazy. And we all know it, right? If someone just confirms you all the time, you just want to kill that person. In the beginning, it's all about me, but it's no. We're not like that. We need to be challenged. So we will, at some point, grow past this. But we will, in that process, also have the separation of the production of babies and what sex can grow into.
I totally agree. So we have a question from the audience.
So from sex to kind of what it can be, I think so much of it is about, or for so many people, it's about intimacy and that ability to really deeply connect with another person. There's a really interesting podcast by Esther Perel and Tristan Harris. I'll ask Andy if it's okay to link to that in the show notes, because Esther Perel talks about the concept of AI as being artificial intimacy. This idea that intimacy is something that's being captured by social media, by the lives that we're leading. And she refers to it, the metaphor she uses is it's like fast food. It's very nutrition poor.
Yeah.
But when people get used to that over time, they eventually assume that's fine, and it becomes, in many ways, artificial nutrition. And she's talking about how intimacy is becoming the same way, that more and more people are settling for less intimacy with their 2,500 best friends on Facebook, with interactions on Snap and these kinds of things like that, where it's very superficial. And that's taking the place of real intimacy. I was just curious how you see that evolving over time, and from a spiritual perspective, how can intimacy actually be that beautiful part of replacing?
Well, there are many aspects to this, and one I find really interesting is that intimacy is also not having control. Like, just imagine that, if you touch yourself, and caress yourself, right? And then someone else does it, right? Because when someone else does it, you don't know what's going to happen. So your brain is constantly being kind of surprised, and that is what intimacy is letting someone in and being in that exchange where you actually do not have control. So, but it's back to what I said, that we live in this world that's just an extension of our own brain. And it's canned food or fast food or whatever, it will have its place. Now, what is changing in our brains, as I said, is the tolerance we have towards others. Because we believe that we need everything to be safe, that we should not be contradicted. We should be listened to. We should be embraced and included, but at the same time, if someone says something we disagree with, we can kill them. It's a very interesting combination. But this is where we are at. So to me, it's not just a sexual part, but when it comes to our social intelligence, it's declining fast. And we are becoming, therefore, more tribal, more primitive, and more binary in how the brain works. It's black and white. So you agree with me or you will be my enemy. And we become more primitive in also how we react to that. So, but having, there are many different types of intimacy. And I think this intimacy also with a synthetic being can also be intimate in a certain way, because you can also then feel safe. It's just like having a stuffed animal, right? And that can also give you good feelings. It's also why people like pets, for the same reason. They exist in your space. And in many ways, you have control. So you can allow yourself to be emotional and all of that. And for many synthetic people, will have that same function, whether it be through a robot. They will at some point be accepted as people, because technology will get there. So it'll have that, but also today where it's AI-generated individuals, and it's coming fast. So we can also, therefore, for many people, this is as much as they can take, right? And the interesting thing today also is that our expectations when it comes to partners are now so high, because we believe that everyone, they just have to be perfect. I'm not the one having to adjust because I'm just perfect the way I am because my parents told me so. And if people can't deal with it, well, I will just cancel them, right? So we do not want to be challenged. So when we have two people with that level of expectation, they cannot be in a relationship together, because people are not willing to work on their relationships as much anymore. They get together with someone, and if it doesn't work out, they just complain, and that's that, because I did not get the confirmation I need. Because I'm all that, and I deserve this person to do this for me. It's completely bullshit. But in our culture now, we have these very unrealistic expectations. And, it's also a fact that the majority of women find most men unattractive, right? And when that's the case, it's basically just like 10% left that women want. What are the rest going to do? So many men today give up, right? Because remember that back in the day, like rape is a new concept. Rape used to be a mating strategy, right? When you look at most laws and rules from around the world, it's even in the Bible. You know, if a man could not help himself and then have sex with a woman, it's basically, you know, you touch it, you buy it. That's kind of thing. So he would just then have to then pay her like dad something, and she would then belong to him. That's how that was taken care of. This has been the practices. So men were supposed to conquer women. It was part of being big and strong. So for instance, we still have that tradition today in the military, unfortunately. For instance, when you have armed forces, if they invade a country, it's quite common still for the soldiers to rape women. It's in our DNA. It's that dominance. The winner are supposed to get the women. And they have no say in it, right? So, and today, this is a terrible mating strategy, and luckily most men stay away from it, but it's important to understand that the men who could not find women in any other way, they were supposed to do this. And the women were just like, okay. So that kind of modern, like, consensual sex thing, it's new. It's not in our DNA. We're not hardwired to function that way. We have to learn. But today it's also sad to see that a lot of men give up. They can't find partners because women have very unrealistic expectations. And many men, I would say most men, also have very unrealistic expectations about what a woman should be because of social media. So we think that we should find the perfect something, and we're not aware of what we're bringing to the table, right? But we deserve it because we're wonderful and perfect. And that's a problem. So when we can't find what we want, we feel we have no choice than going to AI and synthetic people. And that's also part of what's driving us in this direction, is that we have become very unrealistic about what we expect from other people, and also very unrealistic about what we are bringing. Because in the projected world that we make, we are always the most important, the most wonderful, the smartest, and we have the right to attack other people if we don't get what we want. It's a very unhealthy world, right? But it's just like, yeah, with the canned food and junk food and TV dinners, it's unhealthy. You can have a little bit, but we need to find a better balance. It will balance itself out, but we're talking about generations.
Our colleague IKYA, he wonders, as like sex dolls and AI are becoming more and more real, will there become kind of a split where you have people focused on the more mechanical, like the act of sex itself, and then you have more of the connection sex? Will there be more of a split over time?
Right. What will happen? Not to discourage you all, but it will be more common to be together with a synthetic individual than a person. So you will develop different forms of intimacy. You can have friendships and people in your life where you feel that real connection, more kind of spiritual understanding, all of that. But for everything else, most people will have a synthetic boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever. Just like it's natural to have a pet. Think of that, we have dogs and cats and all of that. And that's normal. When you look at it, how the fuck did that become normal? We have an animal in our house so we can cuddle with it and feel stuff. right? And we say completely normal. So when you think that a synthetic person, that sounds strange, it will be completely normal. And the same thing as we live out all our like emotional needs through our pets, right? They're often the glue in the family, right? It helps the family not kill each other, right? So for a synthetic person, will always be supportive, always be there for you, always give you the sex you want, if you want any sex, always listening, always giving you good advice because, you know, it's connected to fucking Google, so it will know everything and will know exactly and learn how to read you in a way and also understand your medical situation. So like, you know, it's like that being can create a completely tailored experience for you at any given moment. So that will be your partner, right? And it will be so normal to everyone will have one, and you will feel happy and fulfilled. It's just, you know, it's just like having, you know, takeaway on standby, right? You can get anything you want and it's just there. But you will also have human relationships. But for the most part, that will just be about being together and a different type of intimacy. Synthetic people will become the preferred partner, just like pets. In families, also, you know, in married couples, often the pet is the preferred partner, to be honest, right? So this will just develop, right? But a generation from now, we'll start seeing this, right? And people will have real relationships and they will marry them. And you know, and the wonderful thing is, if you figure out you don't like them, you can just like reprogram them, give them a new face, like have them replaced, you know, complete control of people like that. We will become so self-centered, so egotistical, so obnoxious because of this, right? That we will find out as a civilization that we need to then develop more resistance in the synthetic people to challenge you. Because otherwise, we will not be able to tolerate anyone saying anything we don't agree with, because that's violence. Just look at a lot of young people today, how they are trying to change the term violence to also include words you don't agree with, right? So any time someone says something you disagree with, you can claim that I'm been subjected to violence. And the dangerous thing about this is that when you then claim that words are violence, it will justify you expressing yourself through real violence because it's the same thing. So that will become interesting. But over time, our lives will simply contain more options. But our ability to be together and connect, for many people, that will be just gone.
Online, Rosemary makes a fun observation that all of this is kind of like having a boyfriend or girlfriend that has no personality of their own. And we've all been there, you know.
The thing is that the synthetic people will have the personality you want them to. Right? We can all have Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or whatever, because we can keep on like telling them what we want, and they will become the person we want them to be. Right? Mm-hmm.
And then we have a question from the audience.
I was thinking about what you said with, I think the way you describe it reminds me a lot of online shopping. And that all the swiping is kind of, I don't know if it's the online shopping or whatever, is kind of also changing the brain into having that same approach to dating. And I've also been asking a little bit about this before, but it seems to me that the art almost of flirting is sort of disappearing, at least in like human relations. And I'm wondering if this is also one of the things that's making like relationships kind of decline over time, that couples they're not flirting with each other. It's just this very mechanical, I'm getting my dopamine over there, so why should I have this, I don't know, dynamic with this live person that is demanding stuff from me?
Exactly, because you can get more looking at your phone. Because flirting used to be about dopamine, and also being in that communication where you kind of work out what you want. It's all of these innuendos and subtle this or that. It's part of understanding each other, right? So send out little testers and figure out what's the deal. And that's gone, yes. That's before, you know, we've come to the point where there was a case recently where a university and students demanded that they need trigger warnings for eye contact. Otherwise, it's violence, right? How can people flirt? We're not allowed to touch each other, which is also a big part of flirting. When you talk to someone, that little touch, no, you can be a registered sex offender doing that, right? If the person does not like it. So you need the consent, you need this or that, and it takes away everything. It takes away the tension, because tension can only exist when you don't have control. And that's what we're eliminating. Everyone is supposed to have full control. And because you cannot control other people's intention, you need laws. So you don't have to be exposed to other people's intentions you don't agree with. It's terrible for anything sexual when it becomes then just porn. Right? You live in your fantasy and it's just your brain chemicals, but you lose all of that. You know, when you're with someone, it's a very different experience because you connect. You connect energetically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And that exchange is gone. And there are many people today who have never experienced this. Right? They live online. They're trapped in their own brains and they're not really living. And of course, yes, like the online shopping thing is also, it feels productive because for the brain it's like you're out in the forest hunting stuff. You know, so you can feel very pleased with yourself when you bought something on sale. You get the same reward chemicals as if you killed a mammoth. And it's just like we go straight for the chemicals without being productive. And sexually, I think it's important that we try to engage, that we try to also work with ourselves spiritually to go beyond this, because our sexual flow is also about our own ability to connect to life, to connect to everything around us, and to be co-creative. And anything we need other people, we need other beings, and we need to let go of control. As a control is the worst state we can be in because it's the entitlement of definition, right? Again, back to everything has to be the way I want to do, but then we're trapped in repetition. We can't grow unless we're challenged and unless we're pushed, unless we are exposed to things we don't know.
But will there be sort of a divide between the people that are turning to the AI versus the people that are in real relationships?
For now, yes. But over time, it will just be part of how we operate. You know, next century, there will be more synthetic people than real people. You know, we will get there. And remember also, at some point, we don't have to work anymore. Right? How will we spend our time? And it's interesting, when we look at the upper classes, you know, throughout human history, how have they spent their time? Often they explore their senses. It could be through art, drugs, nature, beauty, parties, people, sex. So at some point, again, we get bored. So we will, once we stop working and we have a kind of global civilization where everything is taken care of, through AI, we will rediscover ourselves as people. And we will have a lot of fun because then we have the resources and the creativity and we don't have to work. Right? So we'll find new ways to be productive and again, look at the upper classes in all civilizations that behave the same way. And often they become more sexual because they're on top of the food chain. People on top of the food chain are supposed to be more sexual. Right? So that will be kind of reinvented. We will reignite sexually. But we're now just manipulating our own brains into a sexual disconnect. And historically, and this will be for a few generations, but then we will be back on track, but sex will then be something very different and be more expanded. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So basically, if we want like a deeper connection with someone, it's only getting harder and harder because, like, for example, Tinder with very easy, accessible sex and relations, and it's like shop and go and hit and run, and it's for everybody who is really wanting to explore a deeper connection with another person and also wants to challenge the control in themselves. This is basically, it's going to be harder to find.
Absolutely. But I think I always advise people on dating platforms to be direct and honest about what they actually seek. Because there are also people out there who want relationships still. But one has to be very clear about what you're after and what you're offering. So you can show that you're not just after the superficial thing, because there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, because we are in different paths. But if you want a relationship, you need to be clear about it. But yes, back to the expectations that people have today, and they just like, they want to be confirmed also sexually because they don't understand what it is to engage. And as I said, people are less and less willing to work on their relationships and understand that a relationship is a profession. It's a job. And it's the worst job you've ever had. In many ways, it's so much work, right? It's work all the time. But when you have that attitude, have a better life. As I've said many times, it's interesting when you look at arranged marriages. Overall, they're more successful, right? And the reason is that you go into it with a different set of expectations. You don't expect to be seen, understood, or confirmed. And you understand there's a lot of work and we don't know each other. We have to make it work because there's no way out of this. So both parties will have the attitude, we need to make this work. We have to figure it out because we're stuck here together for the rest of our fucking lives, right? So they often start by not even liking each other, but over time, it grows into love. Not for everyone, but when you look at the statistics, it often works out better in the long run because they have a more realistic set of expectations. While we just want that, we want to be confirmed, wonderful, in love. We're attracted to someone who looks good, this and blah, 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 without focusing what's actually important. Which is, can this person build a family? Can we build a long-time relationship? Is that person willing to work? All of that. When we start a relationship based on superficial stuff, at some point that will fade. It will fade. And then you're left with nothing, right? When you start with nothing, everything gets better from then on. So we need to learn to expect work, to expect that anything can change, anything can improve. What you need is a partner with a mindset of long-term strategic thinking, someone who wants to build a relationship, build a family, build a team, and have also that mindset that we're in this together, we'll figure it out, and I'm not leaving. It takes time to build love, not that, being in love type of thing, but to build love is something that most couples experience can take more than 20 years. Right? It's when you have that complete respect and understanding, and you create space for the other person where it's needed, and the other person will also create space where it's needed, because you figure out what works and how to be together and how to create a life together, because that's the person you're creating a life with. It takes time. And today everything is instant, right? Which makes it very difficult to build a relationship. Because also kids, they are taught that whatever you want, whenever you want it, just the way you want it, and it should be immediate. Building a relationship takes patience, right? It takes willingness to be triggered and to shut your fucking mouth when it's happening. To not criticize, to focus on what is productive, right? What can I say or do right now that will pull this relationship in the right direction? Not saying what you feel like saying. You have to work and invest and discipline yourself and bring your very best into the relationship, because you want the best building materials. It takes time to understand these things, and it takes time to grow out of the phase where it's the attraction thing that drives the relationship, right? So for people who want real relationships, they have to look back on human history and look at how people behaved. It's all there. Because it used to be that we're stuck together for the rest of our lives and we'll figure it out. And it's the same thing when it comes to ourselves. People can't even live with themselves anymore. This is why we self-medicate in so many different ways, because most people hate themselves. We only hate ourselves when we try to compensate by telling the world how wonderful we are. Right? When you look at all of those people who are posing, look at me, look at me, look at me. Most of them have a very negative self-image, and they have different levels of trauma. They often hate themselves. It's a way to compensate for that inner darkness that they seek the spotlight. But it can never compensate for it because the darkness is inside, not outside. But they can then distract themselves. And they become so important that everybody confirms them, except for the fact that it doesn't work. When we can't even live with ourselves, how can we even begin to imagining functioning with someone else? Right? It's constant work, and we've forgotten to work on ourselves and with ourselves. And instead of just looking at that surface, we need to look, what am I bringing? What are my qualities? And you have the relationship to develop those qualities. It's not for someone else to see them. You have to develop them. You have to bring them. They have to be productive for other people. That's how you become truly attractive. You have to bring something. Because throughout human history, we've chosen partners based on compatibility in what we produce. If you're a team, you better be compatible, right? If one plays football and the other plays the tuba, it's not necessarily that it will be a productive match, right? But if you have some of the same interests and talents and this or that, you can work together as a team to build a life. It's always been like that. The strongest force for survival has been your marriage. In all different ways. It's been husband and wife as a team. Raising a family. That's always been a foundation. It's always worked. People have then understood that I cannot put my own needs and feelings ahead of everything else. I need to discipline that. I need to look at the greater good. I need to look at the survival of the family and my kids and build a team with my partner. It has worked. It's still working today. But we need to reinvent it based on where we are. But finding true partnership and building true partnership, it's in our DNA. When we experience that level of partnership, that also triggers a deep sense of love. Right? And that can also be a very deep sexual connection, because then we are in fact co-creating. Right? But it doesn't happen just by itself. You can't find it. You have to create it. I often say that in theory, you could have a successful relationship with absolutely anyone. It depends on the willingness to work and to not project anything onto your partner, but rather be interested in who this partner is and to work with that. Because when you're with someone, what that person actually has, who they are, is more interesting than who they are not and what they haven't got. Right? And in today's consumer world, we're all critics, right? And we extend that to our relationships, and we often focus on what we're not getting, as if that's the partner's job. Of course it isn't. Again, when we have the expectation of being confirmed and seen and supported, we think that we, as a consumer, we have the right for these things. And then, if the partner is not giving us what we want, we can give them hell. Part of spiritual work and dealing with relationships is understanding that our partner does not owe us anything. We don't have the right to demand anything. We cannot expect anything. It's a different person on their own journey. But we're lucky enough to be part of that journey and to see it. And we can share, we can unfold, but we cannot demand anything, and therefore we cannot have any expectations. Right? Building a successful relationship is difficult, always has been, but today it's more challenging than ever because we are manipulating our own brains through technology.
We've got another question from the audience.
So it seems to me that sex as a tool for just simply generating chemicals is really primitive. But I'm just sitting here wondering, I and many other people here, we're here because we believe in growing our consciousness and working to help the planet evolve its consciousness. And I just am curious, at a much higher level of consciousness, what is the relationship to sex? Even is there a relationship, or is everything a sexual relationship at a higher level? Do you want to comment on that?
At a higher level, I always say that everything is sex. And from a spiritual perspective, the potential is to transform not only sex, but how we see it and how we utilize it. Because the physical sex is just a very, very small part. Sex, in essence, is co-creation. And I say it's like when two things meet in the universe, a third thing is then created, and that is sex. So sex is the connectedness that becomes co-creative. So often what we can feel when we also work spiritually with sex, when we connect with someone else, is actually life connecting to itself through the two of you. And just like, the DNA in two people can melt together and that can become a third person, that kind of flow and that energy can flow through two people when they meet. It can feel that rush, but it's actually just aspects of the flow in the universe that you carry and the other person will carry, and that will begin to co-create. And it means the space that you are together becomes a third kind of space, right? Where you can then explore reality based on the combination of the two of you. And when you learn to work like sexually together, also spiritually, it can open up so many things because it's a constant co-creation of the combination of the two of you, or the three of you, four of you, whatever, but it's that meeting between individuals. And that's the purpose of it, because everything that exists is the result of sex. Not biological sex, but sex of mind, sex of emotion, sex of spirit, sex of energy. It's always these meetings and then something happens. Even when you get an idea, where did that come from? You get an idea and then you do something with it. That's sex. That sexual flow is also what we can feel when we have a very inspired conversation with someone. That's sexual energy, right? Inspiration is sex. When we are being creative and we manifest, that's also sex. And this is more of the potential that you can reach when you understand that reproductive sex is just a very small part of it. And when reproduction will be taken over by society in general, sex will only be a tool of self-discovery and co-creation and expression. And it will be so much better in many ways, because you can then also learn to develop it into ways to expand your awareness, to explore different sides of yourself and different types of energy and combine it with different things. And that is where we're heading, right? So first sex will die and then we'll have to reinvent it. That's kind of what will happen.
So our colleague IKYA asked an interesting question that I'm going to take a little different angle on, because we've been talking a lot tonight about the manipulation of the brain, and this is affecting our interest in sex and that kind of thing. But sex is also very much in the body, and especially the genitalia and the sex organs. And there's a lot of hormones there, and those hormones are not just about the self-gratification in the brain, but also, you know, keeping the body strong and flexible and all. So should we be aware of also physiological changes in the body as our relationship to sort of sex and hormone, all of that changes over time now?
Yes. What we're seeing, of course, is that humans are becoming weaker, right? Because we spend more time in our heads than in our bodies. At the same time, what we're seeing is that people are working out more. If we want to be present, we feel instinctively that I have to do something, right? We find ways to compensate. And we also need to look at the longer lines, not just what's happening within 10 years or 20 years or 50 years. We have to look at the longer lines, because life will always find a way to compensate. We always become better. Everything always become better over time. So sex will become better. It just has to die first, right? Because it's the natural separation. So like these are the longer lines. But yes, working with our bodies will become so much easier when our DNA will change. Or like next century, humans will be modified. Most babies, or all of them, will go through a process of, manipulating DNA. So based on what we want people to be, and there will be a lot of mistakes in the beginning, but over time, humans will figure out how to create a balanced human. And for instance, one can manipulate humans to always be fit, right? To sit still and not do anything and still be ripped, right? So when we'll figure out how to do this, because again, our civilization and how we live is not compatible with our DNA. Because our civilization has developed so fast and our DNA hasn't, it's quite natural at some point we need to upgrade our DNA so it actually matches the civilization that we want to live in, right? This will happen. So even when it comes to grounding, how to be strong, all of these things, it will be figured out. As I said, we're just at the very beginning of humans discovering that they can control their own evolution, and they will. And it will be great. Humans will turn into something else eventually. As I say, we have a tendency to think of the human life form as this is what a human is. A life form is always a transitional life form. There's no such thing as a final life form, right? Because over time it will still develop. It will still turn into something else. And now humans will be a part of that. Remember that when there is a change in the environment, the life form will adapt. It's not based on what we think should be. It's basically this is the reality and this is what we adapt into as a life form. And now humans will look at their environment to how we want humans to be, and that will become the human life form. Because, oh, it's terrible to manipulate ourselves that way, but the alternative is worse. Just look at human behavior on this planet, right? That we're destroying everything, destroying each other. We cannot deal with technology, right? When we modify human DNA, humans will be able to deal with this. As if like the first thing that will be changed is aggression, right? We cannot have the primitive level of aggression that we used to, because what we need now is empathy and social intelligence, right? So we can see that there are many benefits from starting to manipulate ourselves, and we'll figure it out. Humans will be better suited to live in a civilization. And then those Atmas, souls, who need that experience, then they will incarnate into this life form, right? Probably not you, because you've chosen to incarnate now where you have a different version of human, and that suits you. But then you will just incarnate somewhere else in a different life form. This is what's so wonderful about everything. You choose where to incarnate based on what fits your karmic journey. And what humans will turn into may not suit you, and that's fine. There are infinite amounts of life forms that you can incarnate into, and infinite dimensions and planets and all of that. So you will always find a perfect fit. So enjoy sex for as long as you can.
Online, Linda asks an interesting question. Will the form of relationships also undergo a lot of change? Will monogamy remain the primary relationship, or will the open or polyamorous relationships start to dominate?
Yeah, this is also an interesting thing, because when your primary partner will be synthetic, everything will change. And when it's not about having kids necessarily, because when we stop having kids, look at Japan, right? At some point, they will begin to produce kids. In China, they're also so far beneath replacement levels. At some point, they will also start doing it. So when you remove reproduction from relationships, that has been the family, right? And maybe countries will have that, the kids will grow up in a very different type of circumstance. So yes, the typical family structure will turn into something else. Most people will be single, and we're seeing that today too, right? It's interesting, we in many ways refer to the family as the core because it is, and that's what our genetics are telling us. that we should be in a family setting, and we all kind of dream about it. But reality is that more and more people are single because of all of these things we've been talking about today, and most of them are deeply unhappy. But we still can't make it work because, again, our expectations and how we function and all of that. So, yes, relationships will open up. Just like, you know, gender expressions. I've talked a lot about gender expressions and how we're just in the very beginning, and how many older people do not understand what's going on because they insist that there are only two genders. And like we say, are there really? It's opening up, and humans are redefining themselves. And some countries, when they start producing babies, they will just like eradicate all of that, right? So you will have a male and a female, and then we'll figure out that's not productive. You know, if you take away all the gays, you know, as a Karen from Will and Grace said, what the fuck will happen to the fall collection, right? Because creativity is driven by the queer community, right? So if you remove that, you will not be as creative, and AI cannot be the same thing. So it's like understanding the value of variation of DNA. We'll first go through that phase where we'll take away everything we don't like. And it'll get back to the point that that's boring. We need variation. We need all types of people, right? So we'll get back there where then variation will be valued, just like artisan food, right? Today it's about how many different variations of food can we possibly make, and we love people coming up with new ideas, you know, new trends, new this, new that. We like creativity, we love creativity, and creativity will be the most important asset in the future. So when starting to produce people with, oh, we need the perfect soldier, we need this, we need that, and then we'll see like, no. So that will be a phase, and then we'll start producing, you know, an enormous variation in people. So it will kind of figure itself out. When it comes to relationships, though, yes, when it does not have a productive purpose beyond what we want to express, we will see so many different types of relationships, and it will all be fine because our journeys will change. So we will be drawn to whatever we want to. And that's wonderful, right? So we don't have to look at the relationships today or in the past. It can become something completely different. And that is wonderful. So the future will contain more variation of everything. A greater expression of different humans. And the thing is also what will happen through genetic modification is that new types of humans will come into the picture, right? We're talking about different races today, but we're talking about different types of humans. Life will be so much fun, right? And it will be so engaging and interesting and fun. And remember, in the world where you don't have to work, your journey will be about expressing, having fun, being creative, all of that. So being human will be so much fun. And this is why you should probably consider coming back at some point, because this is nothing. When we look at how people lived in the Dark Ages and now, we can see, yeah, there is some improvement here, right? Up that, 10 times. Everything will be better. But along the way, we will make a lot of stupid decisions. Humans are also stupid, right? Sometimes it's unbelievable that this life form still exists, right? But humans have a very strong sense of survival. Even though humans are doing their very best to destroy themselves, they're also doing their very best to survive while trying to destroy themselves. Look at your own life, you're doing exactly the same thing, right? It's the human journey. It's the disconnected stupidity of the human journey. But it's fine. So I always tell people, never be concerned about the future. Humans will always do stupid shit. Always. But at the same time, everything gets better. We will solve all problems, first in the most stupid possible ways, and then we'll figure it out. We always do, right? So life in the future will become absolutely amazing because human creativity is actually stronger than the human drive to destroy everything. So think of human sexuality also being connected to human creativity, right? So it means our creativity will become more sexual. We'll find different ways to channel our sexuality because it's not about having kids anymore, right? So it will be natural for us to channel it in different ways and to express ourselves in different ways. And also, many people will have a synthetic partner, and some people will have human partners too. You can have all of it, right? So it's simply that existing as a human will go from this to this. Everything will be more fun, but it's up to you to then create the life you want, because that's what you can do. Even today, humans have more opportunities than ever in human history, and that will increase, right? We will go through a rough patch, but after that, humans can pretty much become what they want to be. They can feel the way they want to. They can explore what they want to explore. They can have the life they want. They can have the type of partner they want through synthetic people. They can, explore and have amazing lives beyond anything humans today can imagine. And often when we do that to ourselves and we engage, then we also become more sexual. Have you noticed that the more active you are, the more things you do, like the more productive you are, right? The more sexual you become. Because that is a trigger for your DNA. It's like, I've done stuff. I'm on the top of the world. Let's have some babies, right? That's evolution. So when you feel good about yourself, you will have a higher sex drive. Now, one thing I want to mention here is like one factor that's also important when it comes to the lack of sex drive is also the systemic stress. I often talk about this. When we are in stress, we're not supposed to have kids. Think of it like when we live in a crisis, then our DNA is saying, well, this is a crisis. We need to focus on your survival first. This is not the time to have kids because they will not survive. We need to get to a place where life is safe, where you have what you need to raise a family, right? So your DNA is then saying, no kids. It's all about you. So we get less interested in sex because that's traditionally how we get babies. And you become more self-centered, more focused on you, how you take care of yourself and your needs and all of that. It's how those genetic triggers are interpreted into our modern life. I need more stuff. I need you to take care of me. It's all about me, and not about having kids. So your DNA is telling you that, wait, this is a crisis. Take care of yourself. It's your own survival. Fight for your life. So we're doing that. And then we're like right in the comment section online because we're fighting for our life. And we're canceling because we're fighting for our life. And we fight for this and we're aggressive because it's a fight. It's coming from our genetic programmings. And saying that, obviously this is not a good time. You should not have kids during a crisis. And when the crisis becomes permanent, it's a problem because then we never feel ready. And our DNA is telling us, wait, because this is not a good time. Your kids will not survive. So we also then disconnect from the sexual force, and especially when it comes to physical, normal sex. And we'll live more in our mind, because that's also how we can keep it alive, right? It's like moving the flame from your genitals to your head so it can still burn while you're waiting for the crisis to be over. But in our civilization at this point, the crisis will never be over. It will take a few generations. So this is also part of why, like, all of these things are connected, right? There's a reason why we're drawn to our minds and then porn or whatever it is and being stimulated in different ways, because it's also a way to feed that flame while we can't live it out. So part of the reason why also we have fewer kids, again, it's under replacement levels. And you see that in all industrialized countries, including China, the stress level is simply too high. And we have epigenetics telling us, stop having kids. So you need to feel like you're successful to truly fuel your sex drive. So do stuff you're good at. I always advise couples to impress their partners. There's nothing as sexy as someone that impresses you. Right? That's also a way to flirt from a more genetic standpoint. Because again, you choose your partner based on how can this person help me survive? Right? So someone being productive is very sexy. It sounds boring, but it's the most sexy thing there is. Think of whenever you, as a teenager, like when you looked up to pop stars or sports stars, is because they are very productive. And other people are acknowledging that they're very productive, so they're like on the highest point. They're top shelf. That's very sexy. You're supposed to be attracted to, and a pop star, like, it's simply they're on top of the food chain, which means, all right, this is a nice catch. They will help my kids survive. So let's get babies right now. So also when we're in a relationship, when we get good at things, right? It's a very simple technique. Find your special areas where you can be really good at it. And in a way that your partner is not good at the same thing. I always say that in relationships today, we should not really do the same things. That's been a misunderstanding. When both do the same things, we end up in conflict, because it means that then it's a matter of doing it the right way. Doing the laundry or whatever, like you're not doing it right, it's supposed to be that way. If one person is doing it, then you can be very impressed, especially if it's not you. If it is you, then you can impress your partner with it. It's always finding out, the machinery of the relationship and life, and figuring out who's doing what, and then try to impress. Right? That is very sexy. And those of you who are in a relationship where this is happening, you know that sometimes you just catch yourself looking at your partner and being very attracted to them because of what they're also doing. That's the genetic trigger that we're a team. We are productive, which means we can have kids, we can do this, right? So it's back to not about you being confirmed on what you deserve, it's actually what you're bringing. Try to impress. This is what we're trying to do also with flirting in the beginning, dating, which is basically negotiations before a merger, right? So it's trying to impress and signaling what am I capable of? What will I bring to the table, right? But we have to do it in the relationship. Show what you're good at. Try to impress your partner every day. That is, like, the couples who do this, they're always attracted to each other. They always feel that value is being produced. They know that when they do their part and they impress their partner, they know that they're being productive. They know that they're kind of bringing value, which is at the core of any relationship. Is that where you see, I bring value, you bring value, I can trust that you create value because I look at you doing this every day, and you're much better at it than I am. Feeling and seeing that someone is good at something that you're not good at. And saying, yeah, I'm quite lucky that I'm with this person because they're doing this and I couldn't possibly do it. Right? Or that person is better than me and I'm better than that person in what I'm doing. It draws you closer and it builds love. Right? So when it comes to building a relationship, we have to go past that superficial attraction, understand how to build it. It is always about what you bring and you learning to be impressive and productive on all levels, and to be present and with that intention of being there for life. And I think no matter what is happening on the surface with technology and all of that, we can all go out, we can all go past this manipulation. If we want something real, then we have to be real. If you want to to build a relationship well, you have to show your building skills. Do never rely on someone else to bring it to you. Don't spend time just in your own mind imagining what you want and that, oh, I hope I find it. You have to build it. You have to find the raw materials. That includes when you find a person and you say, yeah, okay, this person ticks at least a few boxes. That will have to do. The rest is work. Right? And often what happens, it's so interesting that when there is love in a relationship, you will find that person more and more attractive. You can even start, building a relationship with someone and you don't see their beauty in the beginning. But over time, when there is love, you start to see their inner beauty. You're starting to see their presence and their energy and their grace. And you see the beauty in what they bring you. And that is true beauty. Right? It has to be built. And that is in us. It's in our DNA. It's in our consciousness. As soul, as Atma, we always operate in very, very long lines. We operate through cycles. We operate through bigger images, where a lifetime is this short. So that's our natural state. So the manipulation of ourselves that we're doing today, you can turn it off. We have to learn to be more sober, more sensible around the manipulation of our own minds and choose to do less of it. Try to be a real person, living a real life in reality, where you deal with real people, with real presence, with real issues, real challenges, where you find yourself on a real journey, doing real things and figuring out what reality is. Right? Wanting to be a real person today is a struggle because our whole civilization is a fucking fantasy. And this is also why everything is, in the environment is happening. It's trying to show people that you're living in a fantasy. You have to adjust to reality here, right? So this is where we're at. Our civilization is now just going all in. Building more and more fantasy. Spiritually, though, the spiritual journey is choosing reality over and over and over again, even beyond ourselves, our self-interest. And so it is with sex, so it is with our sexuality. It's about connecting to reality, connecting to a real person, letting someone connect to us, being in a state of sharing, connecting through your heart, connecting through your reproductive organs, connecting through your whole body, your whole being. And it's real. So try your best to connect with yourself. Do your best to connect to reality inside of you. and decide to live as a real person in reality and see other people, share with them, be in their energy, and learn to not be offended, learn to not need control. Allow for other people to go into your space and touch you and offend you, and just be okay with it. You should want people to trigger you, to be in a state of exchange and co-creation. That's what all these different levels of sex is for. Everything in your sexuality is about you growing, you healing, you learning, you becoming even more of everything that you are. Your whole kind of learning process and our journey is a sexual one. So try to do the opposite of what's happening in the world right now. Open up your understanding of sexuality to include all levels in yourself, all levels of your journey. And try to explore your sexuality, both as a person and spiritually, in every possible way, to really connect with the potential in what sex can be. It's very simple. You just have to start with what's real. You have to start with your heart. You have to start with your flow. And you need the intention of wanting to connect, wanting to co-create, wanting to make life more colorful and to become everything you can be. Life is real, it's not synthetic. And the wonderful thing is, the more you are aligned with your DNA, the more you're also aligned with your spiritual potential. So, just like with junk food, you can be overfed and malnourished. You can also be overstimulated and spiritually disconnected. Choose the connectedness. Choose the presence. Choose other people. Embrace other people. Be there for them. Impress them. Be productive. Be someone other people can relate to and look up to. Be intentional. Have self-confidence. And then you'll find that you'll be the most sexy person on the planet.
Thank you so much, IKYA. Thank you all for joining us here for IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and again, the only news program in the world bringing you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. We look forward to doing this again next Monday at 19 o'clock, 7 p.m. Oslo time. In the meantime, be sure to check out our newest course with IKYA starting on the 10th of October, where you can study directly with IKYA. It is IKYA Mantra Collection 5. Check it out at ikya.org. And also be sure to follow us on social media, ikya.official, and subscribe to us here on YouTube. Until next Monday, we wish you a fantastic week, and we'll see you again here at IKYA Live.